The rain fell like sorrow on the distant trade moon of Selari, a gentle but endless rhythm that washed away footprints, memories, and sometimes even names. Beyond the glittering central spires, where the nobles danced and bartered under silk lights, the outer sectors stretched like a forgotten echo. There, the edges of the moon frayed into swampy lowlands and starlit plains. No one went there unless they had nowhere else to be. Naven liked it that way. He was a quiet figure with moss-wrapped sleeves, thin boots worn from walking unmapped trails, and hair like wind-scattered roots. No one remembered where he came from. Not even him, really. He told the curious few that he was a botanist. A collector of strange seeds. A friend to things that grew without permission. His home was an old observatory dome perched on a hill overrun by climbing vines. The structure had once belonged to the Selari Guild of Celestial Scholars, but now it was filled with plants from across the galaxy. Bloom pods that sang when touched. Fruiting thistles that only opened under moonlight. Even the roof had cracked open to let the stars inside. On most days, Naven moved through the garden barefoot, touching petals and noting growth. On most nights, he read to the plants from forgotten books and let silence stretch between the roots. But everything changed the night of the twin storms. They came without warning, twin spirals of wind and blue lightning that split the sky like a broken shell. The rain came sideways, slashing through the hills. Trees bent until their branches snapped like twigs. Animals screamed from the forest and ran without knowing where. Naven didn't run. Instead, he stepped into the rain with a raincloak made from leaf hide, clutching a half-charged scanner in one hand. The other he kept on the braided leather cord at his waist. A storm this fierce meant one thing: something had disturbed the wind. A beacon on his scanner pulsed. Red. Not the usual amber of salvage warnings or green of traveler distress. This was red. And that meant something sacred or dangerous had broken free. He followed it beyond the vine fields and broken satellite masts. Past the hollowed-out ridges where old mining drones lay rusting like skeletons. The beacon pulsed louder as he moved into the basin, a place even birds avoided. And there he saw it. Curled beneath the roots of a fallen tree, half buried in mud and glowing softly through the rain, was a creature pulled from myth. It was huge, long-limbed, its back armored with natural plating that shimmered like dusk water. Silver-white fur clung wetly to its sides, soaked and matted with blood. Strange gold lattices were embedded along its spine, cracked and sparking. Its face, elongated and lupin, with narrow glowing eyes, turned toward him slowly. A Kalanai. Naven froze. He had only heard of them in whispers. Sacred beasts, bonded to royal lineages. Crafted in old biolabs during the war and now kept hidden in temple vaults. They were considered divine weapons. Each one could tear through a battle line alone. No one touched them. No one freed them. No one survived being seen with one. But here it was. Wounded. Shaking. Alone. And it was looking at him. "You're not supposed to be here," Naven murmured, more to himself than the creature. The Kalanai growled, low and weak, its jaws barely opening. Sparks flared in its back where a piece of lattice had snapped inward. Its breathing was uneven, labored. Naven lowered his scanner slowly. He knelt in the mud without moving closer. "I'm not here to harm you." He took a small packet from his satchel and opened it, revealing 2 thick balm leaves soaked in healing resin. Then, just as slowly, he unfolded a collapsible water bowl and placed it several paces away from the creature. The Kalanai's eyes flicked to it. It didn't move. The rain kept falling. Thunder rolled overhead, softer now but still watching. "You'll die out here," Naven said softly. "If not from your wounds, then from the cold." Still nothing. He didn't approach. He just placed the leaves carefully in front of him and sat in the wet grass, legs crossed, palms open. He waited. The moon rose higher. After nearly 2 hours, the Kalanai shifted. It dragged itself an inch forward. Then another. Its paw, massive and clawed, pushed against the soaked soil. It reached the water bowl and drank, each movement slow and deliberate. Naven didn't smile. He didn't move. He just watched. "You're stronger than you look." A low growl hummed in the beast's chest, not hostile, just tired. For a long time, they sat together in the storm. Nothing else moved. Then the air changed. Naven felt it before he heard it. The hum of gliders cutting through the clouds. Sleek and sharp, flying in formation. Royal military. He stood slowly. 3 gliders descended in a V-shape above the basin, their lights flashing cold blue. They touched down near the ridge, and from each came soldiers clad in reflective armor, stormglass masks hiding their faces. The lead one raised a stun lance. "Step away from the beast," she said. Naven didn't flinch. "It's injured. You are under arrest for unauthorized contact with a Kalanai." "I didn't touch it." "Intent is enough. By decree of Queen Saraveth, all sacred beasts are temple-bound. Aiding one is punishable by death." He said nothing. The soldiers advanced. The Kalanai let out a deep, rising growl that made the very roots tremble. It rose, one leg at a time, blood dripping from its plated shoulders. Lightning crackled in its fur. "Halt," the lead guard barked, lifting her lance. "It's unstable." But the beast didn't strike. Instead, it moved toward Naven. Slowly, painfully. And then, before the entire armed unit, it bowed its head low beside him. A full submission gesture. The guards froze. "That's not possible," whispered one. "It's bonded," said another, voice shaking. "But not to her bloodline." "He's not royalty," the leader snapped. "He's not even registered." "Then why did it choose him?" Naven stood in the rain, confused and soaked, while the Kalanai leaned into his side like a shadow returning home. And then, from above, a floating royal skiff descended. It bore no markings except a single crest, a broken crown. From behind its tinted screen came a voice, clear and smooth as silk. "Bring the man," it said. "And the beast." There was no anger. No urgency. Only curiosity. The guards backed off. The Kalanai growled low again, but Naven placed a hand gently on its neck. "I think we're being summoned." And then, with soldiers forming a silent escort, Naven walked through the basin, the Kalanai limping at his side. They didn't chain it. They didn't try. By the time they reached the domed edge of the outer court, traders had begun to whisper. A sacred beast. Outside the palace. Walking beside a moss-wrapped stranger. Not attacking. Not killing. But guarding. Loyal. To him. The Queen's court was already stirring with unease. But Naven didn't hear any of that. He was focused only on the creature at his side. The way its breathing stayed shallow. The way its eyes still scanned for danger, even after everything. He led it through the gates of the garden dome. Opened the reinforced glass door. And pointed to the soft moss near the heater coils. "You can rest there. If you want." The Kalanai took one slow step forward. Then another. Then it lay down. Curled around itself. And let out a long, shaking breath. Naven sat beside it. And for the first time in many cycles, he felt something that hadn't bloomed inside him since his first heartbreak under another moon. He felt trust. He didn't know what this creature was. He didn't know why it had chosen him. But he whispered softly to the quiet air. "You're not the only one who was locked away." The palace of Selari sat upon stone carved by wind and memory. Its walls glimmered not from wealth, but from time, veins of pearl and starlight woven into ancient rock. Everything here was quiet. Too quiet. Even the laughter of courtiers sounded rehearsed. Even the shadows walked with careful grace. Zilari had always felt like a stranger here. She had grown up in the palace archives, raised among scrolls and memory orbs, breathing in the scent of preserved ink and old dust. Her hands were always ink-stained, her eyes always drawn to forgotten footnotes and myth fragments. While others trained in swordplay or politics, she read about beasts that could speak without words and stars that changed their shape to follow the hearts of those they loved. So when the queen summoned her one morning with an expression carved from cold stone, she had not expected what came next. "The Kalanai has chosen someone," Queen Sereveth said. "A commoner. A botanist from the outer rim. I want to know why." Zilari blinked once. "Your Grace, you believe the choice was real." "I saw it with my own eyes," the queen said, voice flat. "It bowed to him. It walked beside him. It did not answer to me." Zilari said nothing. "Find out what holds its loyalty," the queen continued. "If he used forbidden tech, if he made a bond through old bloodline trickery, I want to know. And if he didn't?" The queen looked out the crystal wall toward the sky gardens. "Then we will have to rethink everything." Zilari found him sitting under a hanging fern in the guest wing, the Kalanai curled beside him like a white shadow. Both of them looked out of place amid the clean lines and glowing walls. He didn't look like a threat. He wore soft fabric stitched at the seams. His boots were still muddy. His fingers had cuts on them, old ones that had healed without care. His hair was tied back loosely, as though he'd forgotten to do it properly. But it was his silence that caught her. Not cold. Not arrogant. Quiet, like a stream running deep underground. He looked at her when she entered. No bow. No words. Just watched. Zilari cleared her throat. "I'm here to ask questions," she said softly. "Not as a soldier. Just as a historian." He nodded once. "Then ask." She sat across from him, careful not to move too quickly near the Kalanai. The beast's red eyes flicked open. Watched her. But made no sound. "Your name is Naven, yes?" "Yes." "What did you do before the storm?" "I tended plants." "Why did you help the Kalanai?" "Because it was hurt." Zilari tilted her head. "You knew what it was. What it meant." "I did." "And you still helped." Naven looked at the beast beside him. "What else was I supposed to do? Leave it in the mud?" Zilari fell silent. This wasn't the answer she'd expected. Most would have lied. Made themselves the hero of some clever story. Claimed a hidden prophecy or secret technology. But he didn't. He simply spoke like it had all been obvious. "You weren't afraid?" she asked. "I was." He didn't elaborate. Zilari looked at the Kalanai again. Its breathing had slowed, healed. Its coat shimmered faintly under the garden lights. She could see now that its body bore old scars, not just from the storm, but from before. Claw marks. Blade slashes. Healed bones that had once been shattered. She looked back at Naven. "Did it speak to you?" "Not in words." "How then?" Naven hesitated. "In silence," he said. "In the way it didn't strike. In the way it leaned toward me when I spoke." Zilari felt a strange tightness in her throat. "That doesn't make sense," she whispered. "These creatures were made for war. They're bonded through bloodlines and neural cores. They don't choose without command." "Maybe it remembered what it was before that," Naven said quietly. Zilari didn't know what to say to that. She stood. Bowed lightly. "I'll return tomorrow." He nodded. She turned to go. Paused. "My name is Zilari." He looked at her. "I know." When she returned the next day, she brought old records. And the next, poetry written during the first beast trials. She didn't know why. She told herself it was research. That it was necessary. But on the fourth night, she brought nothing. She just sat beside him in the quiet garden, both of them listening to the breath of the Kalanai between them. When you touch plants, she asked suddenly, do you talk to them? Sometimes. What do you say? Navin shrugged. Not much. I just listen. To what? To how they want to grow. She smiled. A real one. Soft, almost accidental. He didn't notice. Or maybe he did, and just didn't say anything. They watched the moonlight shift across the leaves. Watched the Kalanai twitch in its sleep. Zilari leaned back against the warm stone wall and exhaled. I've never felt at peace in this place, she admitted. Not once. Not until this week. Navin didn't answer. But he looked at her, and that look was enough. Later that night, after she had left, the queen sat in her private chamber surrounded by data scrolls and flickering holograms. He has no titles, she said aloud. No genetic links. No ancestral claims. Her advisor nodded. And yet, the beast has not left his side. Do you believe in true bondings? She asked. I believe in things I can measure, Your Grace. And what if this can't be measured? The advisor didn't respond. In the garden, Zilari lay awake on a stone bench. Listening to the wind. Thinking of a man who spoke like roots growing quietly in the dark. She didn't understand what this feeling was. Not yet. But she knew one thing. For the first time in her life, she wanted to stay. The sky over Selari was streaked with pale fire, dawn crawling like a wound across the horizon. The wind carried whispers, not from mouths but from the old stones beneath the palace, where ancient beasts had once walked free and chose who they knelt beside. Arvin stood alone in the starlit corridor beneath the echo chamber, hands clenched, heart heavy. He had trained his whole life to serve the queen's will. Raised in the southern wing of the temple barracks, fed discipline and silence, taught to read the moods of sacred beasts before he could even write his own name. They trusted him. Not because he commanded them. But because he learned to see them. Feel them. Let them be wild without punishment. But that was before the queen locked them away. Before they were kept in stasis chambers. Before their eyes dulled and their bodies forgot what freedom tasted like. He had not spoken his doubts aloud. Not until now. Not until the Kalanai chose someone else. He had seen the footage, a stranger in rags, a botanist from the outer sectors, walking side by side with the most dangerous beast in royal archives. Not leashed. Not chained. Chosen. And something in Arvin had cracked open at the sight. Because it meant something. Something the queen didn't want to name. But the court did. They whispered now in every shadowed hallway. If the beast can choose a stranger, what else might choose against us? Arvin stood at the gate to the echo chamber as the doors opened. A cold wind swept through the ancient arena, carved into the bones of the moon itself. The walls were dark stone layered with runes that hummed faintly when blood was near. At the center was a pit ringed with silver flame. Navin stood at the center of that pit. He looked small. Quiet. But not afraid. Beside him, the Kalanai paced in slow, careful circles, fur bristled, tail low. Its red eyes glinted beneath the firelight. Zilari stood at the edge of the circle, wrapped in a cloak too thin for the chill. Her hands trembled, but her gaze never left Navin. This is madness, she whispered to Arvin. He didn't reply. He stepped forward. The queen sat high above, flanked by her silver-masked council. Her voice echoed through the hollow like a stone dropped into still water. The trial will proceed. The beast has defied the crown. The man has defied the law. Let them now prove if their bond is truth or accident. Arvin spoke, words measured. And what is the trial? A chamber guard answered. The Echo Trial. The man will stand unarmed. The beast will face a summoned war beast. If it protects him, they live. If not. I know the end of it, Arvin said, voice sharp. The gates opened. The creature that stepped through was a Chimera-class war beast. Bulkier than the Kalanai. Plated in dark synthetic armor. Foam boiling from its jaws. Its mind a mess of code and instinct bred only to destroy. Zilari's breath caught. The queen said nothing. Arvin looked at Naven across the pit. He saw the man wasn't trembling. Not even blinking. Just standing beside the Kalanai like it had always been there. The beast growled. Arvin stepped toward the edge. He should have stayed silent. But his voice betrayed him. Naven, he called, do you trust it? The Kalanai's head turned at the sound. Naven didn't look away from the oncoming war beast. Yes, he said. Then don't move. The war beast charged. The pit shook. Zilari shouted something, but Arvin didn't hear her. He was watching the Kalanai. The way its body moved, fluid, silent, purposeful. It didn't leap blindly. It didn't snarl in rage. It waited. Until the last moment. Then it surged forward, colliding with the war beast in a blur of white and silver. Claws tore through armor. Fangs sank into synthetic muscle. The crowd above screamed. The war beast roared. Its tail lashed out, striking the Kalanai across the flank. Blood. Zilari gripped the edge of the stone railing. Stop the trial, he's bleeding. But the queen raised a hand. Let it end on its own. The Kalanai rolled, dragging the war beast down. Its jaws locked around the neck joint, pulling wires and bone apart. One final twist. Silence. The war beast collapsed, twitching. The Kalanai stood over it, panting, fur stained with crimson. Then it turned. And walked slowly back to Naven. It pressed its head against his chest. And sank to the ground. Naven knelt beside it without a word. His hands gently touched the worst of the wounds. Zilari ran down the steps before anyone could stop her. She fell to her knees beside them, heart pounding. You're both alive. Naven looked up, eyes dark but calm. Only because it chose to be. Arvin stepped into the circle. He bowed, not to Naven, not to Zilari. To the beast. You shouldn't have had to prove anything, he said softly. Zilari looked at him, surprised. He met her gaze. The queen will twist this. She'll say it proved she was right to test them. Will you stand against her, she asked. He hesitated. Then nodded. I will. The queen's voice rang out again, but softer this time. This trial is done. The beast lives. The bond is real. No one cheered. No one clapped. Too many in the court had seen something they couldn't explain. And fear always follows what can't be explained. That night, Arvin left the temple wing and crossed into the guest quarters alone. He found Naven sitting beneath the low crystal tree that pulsed with soft biolight. The Kalanai lay beside him, stitched and wrapped, breathing evenly. Zilari sat with them, her head resting on Naven's shoulder, her hand barely touching his. Arvin sat nearby. You didn't have to come, Naven said quietly. I know. But you did. Arvin looked at the beast. We trained them to obey. To fight. To bleed for people who never earned their loyalty. I think you broke that cycle. Naven said nothing. Zilari looked at both of them. So what happens now? The wind rustled through the glowing leaves. No one answered. But the Kalanai lifted its head. And the stars above flickered as though blinking. As if something old and sacred had been heard at last. The palace was too quiet after the trial. Servants moved like ghosts. Courtiers bowed too deeply. Even the crystal songbirds that nested in the upper gardens had fallen silent. The Kalanai had killed a war beast before the eyes of the royal court. But that wasn't what shook them. What truly haunted their dreams was the way it returned to Navan. Loyal. Calm. Bloodied and proud, resting its head against him as if he were home. Not once had it looked to the queen. Not once. Queen Saraveth watched from her private chamber, hands clasped behind her back. She had not slept in 3 nights. She stared through the frostglass window at the garden below, where Navan walked among the silverleaf trees with the beast beside him. Zilari walked beside them, fingers brushing Navan's hand in quiet rhythm. Their closeness was not loud. Not grand. But it was steady. The queen closed her eyes. "You should have told me," a voice said behind her. She didn't turn. "You have no right to speak to me. And you have no right to keep rewriting the truth." She turned slowly now. And there he was. Selen. Taller than she remembered. The years had not touched his eyes, but they had carved lines into the corners of his mouth. He wore no crown. No crest. Only a cloak of dark fabric embroidered with wild vines. A traveler's cloak. Faded, real. Her voice came soft. "How did you return?" "I never left the system," he said. "Only the court. Only your shadow." She looked away. He stepped forward. "I saw the trial. So did everyone else." "Yes. But I saw something else too. Do you remember when we first met the Kalanai brood? Before the breeding labs, before the war." She nodded once. "They were smaller then. Softer. They trusted us. And we broke that trust. You ordered them into fire. Into slaughter. You had their minds reprogrammed. They were made for war. They were made for love," he said softly. "They were made to choose." She said nothing. Selen let the silence sit, heavy between them. Then he said, "You locked away Snowthroat." Her eyes flicked up at the name. "Don't call it that." "But that's its true name," Selen whispered. "Not beast, not weapon, Snowthroat was the first. The oldest. It chose you once." She closed her eyes. "And then it turned on me." "No," he said. "You turned on it." She flinched as if struck. Selen walked to the window. "I came back because I felt the echo. You buried them in silence, Saraveth. But one by one, the old ones stir. The people are remembering." "And what do you want me to do?" she asked. "Hand the throne to a gardener and his pet?" "No," he said. "But I think you already know that the throne means less than what it once protected." She turned to him then. Truly looked. And for the first time in years, she looked tired. Not weak. Not afraid. Just worn. Like a storm tower still standing, but missing the sky it was meant to face. "He's changed everything," she whispered. "Yes," Selen said. "And you know why." Navan sat under the rain roof of the guest garden that evening, his hands cupped around a steaming bowl of root tea. Zilari lay beside him, her head resting gently on his leg. The Kalanai, Snowthroat, as the name had come to him unspoken, curled close to the wall, its breathing calm. He didn't speak for a long time. Zilari was the one who broke the stillness. "You think the queen will exile you?" Navan stared into the steam. "No. Why not?" "Because it's too late for exile. The people saw." She sat up, her eyes searching his face. "You didn't ask for any of this. You didn't want power." "I wanted to help," he said. That was all. She reached for his hand, fingers threading between his. "Then let's keep helping." He looked at her, quiet. She leaned in, slow, unsure, until her forehead rested against his. "I don't know what's coming," she whispered. "Neither do I," he replied. And then they kissed. Not like the palace imagined romance, with ceremony and grand music. But like two people who had held silence long enough to recognize the sound of someone staying. The court fractured 2 days later. Half the nobles demanded the beast be reclaimed for the throne. The other half whispered of renewal, of change, of a forgotten truth waking in the bones of the people. And in the middle of the storm, Selen returned to the Hall of Judgment. He stood at the center stone with no army, no command. Only the truth. "The beasts were never created to serve," he said. "They were created to feel. The Kalani are not machines. They remember." A ripple of unrest moved through the chamber. The queen sat silent on her throne. Until she stood. And said, "Then let them speak for themselves." A new gathering was called. Not in the court. Not in the throne room. But in the open garden beneath the twin suns, where the oldest runes still pulsed in the stone paths, long hidden beneath royal moss. Naven stood there. Zilari beside him. Arvan beside her. Selen beside them all. And Snowthroat, once a tool of war, stood tall in the sunlight, its silver-white fur catching every golden strand of day. The queen walked forward alone. No guards. No mask. No armor. Only her. She stopped before Naven and the beast. And knelt. Snowthroat tilted its head, confused. And then, gently, it stepped forward. Pressed its muzzle to her shoulder. Not in command. Not in fear. But forgiveness. Tears spilled down Saravetha's cheeks. "I lost you," she whispered. "But I think, I never really saw you." She stood, slowly, and turned to the crowd. "I cannot lead a people who no longer believe in the old ways," she said. "And I cannot cage the future to satisfy the past." Her voice cracked. But she didn't stop. "A new era begins now." She stepped back. And in the garden, among wildflowers and sunlight and the quiet breath of a healing beast, silence bloomed. But it was not the silence of control. It was the silence of something old and sacred. Being set free.